I honestly believed the silence was a luxury. With Lila away on her school trip for 5 days, I finally had the house to myself. Just coffee and quiet. Then the phone rang. It was Jonah, the boy who cuts my grass, and his voice was trembling. He swore he heard sobbing coming from my basement window well, but that was impossible. I was the only one with a key, and I was sitting at my desk across town. The silence in my house was usually a commodity I could not afford. Between the mortgage on the Colonial Revival in Maple Hollow, the unending stream of utility bills that seemed to multiply in the mailbox, and the emotional overhead of raising a teenage daughter alone, silence was expensive. It meant nothing was breaking, no one was fighting, and for once, the world was holding its breath. For the last 2 days, the silence had been free. My daughter, Lila, was 300 miles away in a lodge near the state line, attending a 5-day leadership retreat sponsored by her school. We had spent the week prior fighting over packing lists and whether or not she needed a heavy coat in early October, when the bus finally pulled away from the school parking lot, putting an expanse of highway between us. I felt that complicated mixture of parent guilt and absolute, intoxicating relief. I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of coffee that was actually hot, staring at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight hitting the granite. It was Tuesday. I had taken the morning off to catch up on the administrative debris of my life before heading into the office for the afternoon shift. The only blot on my schedule was the Homeowners Association. Maple Hollow prided itself on a uniform aesthetic, a manicured perfection that felt less like a neighborhood and more like a film set. I had received 2 letters in the last month about the length of my fescue and the unkempt state of the hydrangeas bordering the foundation. I did not have the time to garden, and I certainly did not have the money for a high-end landscaping crew, but the threat of fines was enough to make me cave. I had hired a local outfit called Greenklein Groundskeeping. It was not a big operation, just a local kid named Jonah Klein and his beat-up truck. He was 22, polite to a fault, and had grown up 3 streets over. He knew the neighborhood, which meant he knew the expectations. He was supposed to be there around noon to do a full trim and edge. I planned to be at my desk by then, safely buried in spreadsheets, letting him handle the exterior while I handled the income. I washed my cup, placed it in the drying rack, and grabbed my bag. The house felt sealed, a vault of calm. I locked the front door, checked it twice a habit from the early days of the divorce, and walked to my car. By 1 p.m, I was at work, staring at a dual monitor setup and trying to reconcile a vendor account that was $400 off. The phone on my desk chirped. It was my personal cell. Vibrating against the wood, I glanced down. It was Jonah Klein. My stomach gave a small, irritation-fueled lurch. I assumed he was calling to tell me his mower broke or that he needed to reschedule. I picked up, putting on my professional voice. "Hi, Jonah," I said. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause on the line. The background noise was wind and the distant hum of a leaf blower. But Jonah himself was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was tight, pitched higher than usual. "Ms. Brooks," he said. "Yes? Are you home?" "No. I am at work. Why did something happen to the sprinklers?" "No, ma'am." He took a breath, a jagged sound that the microphone picked up clearly. "I am at the house. I was trimming the shrubs on the east side, by the chimney." "Okay," I said, my patience thinning. I turned off the trimmer to check the line feed. Jonah said, "It got quiet. And then I heard it." "Heard what crying?" he said. I frowned. Leaning back in my office chair, the office around me was buzzing with low-level chatter. Printers firing, phones ringing. The contrast with Jonah's intense, hushed tone was jarring. "Crying," I repeated, "like a cat." "There are stray cats in the neighborhood." "Jonah, no, ma'am. It was not a cat. Then it was probably the wind." I said, "You know how those old aluminum vents are. If the wind hits the intake just right, it moans. It sounds ghostly." "Ms. Brooks, listen to me." He interrupted. He sounded scared. That was the thing that made me stop typing. Jonah was a big kid, broad-shouldered, used to working with loud machinery. He did not sound like someone who got spooked by a draft. It was coming from the window well. The deep one. The one that looks into your basement. I froze. I was down on my knees pulling a weed. He continued. My head was right next to the grate. I heard it twice. It was sobbing. It sounded like a person trying to be quiet, like they were holding their breath and then letting it out in a sob. My hand gripped the phone tighter. The rational part of my brain, the part that managed bills and schedules and teenage drama, immediately went to work dismantling his statement. Jonah, the house is empty. I locked it myself 3 hours ago. Lila is in another state. I am here. There is no one inside. I know, he said. That is why I'm calling you. It stopped when I stood up and crunched the gravel, but I know what I heard. It sounded human. The hair on the back of my arms stood up. It was a primal reaction, completely at odds with the fluorescent lights of my office. Stay there. I said, do not go inside. Do not try to be a hero. I am coming home. I hung up before he could argue. I grabbed my purse, ignoring the confusion of my supervisor as I walked past her desk, and muttered something about a family emergency. The drive home usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 12. My mind was a chaotic loop of scenarios. A break-in, a squatter Daniel. My ex-husband, Daniel Rusk, had not been a threat in a physical sense, mostly just a vacuum of responsibility, but desperation makes people do strange things. But Daniel moved to the city 2 years ago. He rarely came out to the suburbs unless it was to pick up Lila, and he certainly did not have a key. Did he? I tried to remember if I had changed the locks after the final papers were signed. I had not. We had been civil. He had handed over his key ring on the kitchen counter. A symbolic gesture, but a key is just a piece of metal. It can be copied at any hardware store for $3. I turned into Maple Hollow. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as it had that morning. The maples were turning a brilliant, burning red. The lawns were green squares of order. It was infuriatingly normal. I pulled into my driveway. Jonah's truck was parked on the street. He was standing near the front porch, holding a rake like a weapon, looking at the front door. I got out of the car. The slam of the door echoed in the quiet street. Jonah jumped. Ms. Brooks, he said as I approached. He looked pale under his tan. Tell me exactly where, I said. He pointed around the side of the house, the east wall, the window well that fed light into the laundry area of the basement. I walked toward the gate. The side gate was a tall cedar privacy fence. I always kept it latched from the inside. To open it, you had to reach over the top and flip the metal bar. I stopped. The latch was flipped outward. It was a small thing, a tiny mechanical detail, but my muscle memory was flawless when it came to securing my home. I knew exactly the sound it made when I slapped it shut. I knew I had closed it last week after taking the trash bins out. Jonah, did you go through this gate? I asked. No, ma'am, he said. I was working on the front beds first. I came around the outside of the fence to get to the side yard. I pushed the gate open. It swung silently. I walked into the side yard, my heels sinking slightly into the grass. The window well was a semicircle of corrugated steel, dug deep into the earth, covered by a heavy iron grate to keep animals out. I stood over it and listened. Silence. Just the wind rustling the dry leaves of the burning bush planted nearby. I crouched down, just like Jonah had. I put my ear near the grate. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator compressor vibrating through the foundation. I could hear the house breathing, but no crying. I do not hear anything. Jonah, I said, looking up at him. He looked miserable. I swear. Ms. Brooks, I am not crazy. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. I am going inside. Stay here. If I yell, you call 911. I walked back to the front porch. As I reached for my keys, I looked down at the welcome mat. Yesterday, an Amazon package had been delivered, a box of water filters. I had seen the notification on my phone at work, seen the photo of the box sitting right there against the brick. I had forgotten to bring it in last night because I had been on the phone with Lila until late. The porch was empty. I stared at the blank space where the box should have been. The wind could not move a box of filters, A stray dog would not carry it off. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A hard, painful rhythm. First the gate, now the box. I unlocked the front door. I pushed it open and announced myself to the empty foyer. "Hello," I yelled. The word sounded thin. Swallowed by the hallway, I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. I dropped my keys in the bowl. The clatter too loud. The house smelled like it always did, vanilla reed diffuser and old wood. I walked through the living room, checking the corners. Nothing. The kitchen was undisturbed. My coffee cup was still in the drying rack. I moved to the hallway that led to the basement door. The door to the basement was original to the house. Solid wood, painted white. It usually swung open with a gentle push. I reached for the knob, turned it, and shoved. It stuck. It resisted, held by friction at the bottom of the frame. As if the wood had swollen overnight, I had to put my shoulder into it and shove hard. It gave way with a loud pop. Swinging inward, I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down into the dark. "Hello," I called again. "Is anyone down there? I've called the police." I lied. "They are on their way." Silence. I flipped the switch at the top of the stairs. The fluorescent tubes below flickered, hummed, and then bathed the concrete floor in cold. White light. I walked down. One step at a time. The stairs creaked. I knew every creak. I knew which step to skip to be silent. But today I stepped on every single one, announcing my presence. The basement was finished, but barely. It was a playroom for a child who had outgrown it, filled with boxes of holiday decorations and old furniture. The carpet was industrial gray. I scanned the room, the shadows behind the furnace, the stack of plastic bins, the closet under the stairs. Everything looked normal. Then I walked toward the laundry area, the unfinished corner where the utility sink and the sump pump lived. This was where the window well looked in. I stopped. On the concrete floor, right next to the drain, was a puddle. It was small, maybe 6 inches across. I knelt down. The floor was otherwise bone dry. We had not had rain in 3 days. The pipes above were wrapped in insulation and showed no signs of sweating. I touched the edge of the puddle with my finger. It was clear, cold, water. But then I smelled it. It was faint, cutting through the musty scent of the basement. A sharp, chemical tang. It smelled like fresh adhesive, or maybe a strong industrial cleaner, the kind that burns your nose if you get too close. I stood up and looked around. There were no open bottles of bleach, no glue tubes. I looked up at the window. It was high on the wall, a rectangular slit of glass. The latch was rusted shut. Spiderwebs draped the corners, thick and undisturbed. If someone had come in, they had not come through that window. But the smell was there, and the puddle, and the gate, and the missing package. I pulled my phone out and dialed the non-emergency line for the Maple Hollow police. I did not feel justified calling 911. I was not being attacked. I was just unsettled. I went back upstairs, leaving the basement lights on. I opened the front door and waved to Jonah, who was pacing by his truck. I called them. I said. He nodded, looking relieved that he did not have to go in there. Officer Miller arrived 20 minutes later. I knew him vaguely. He had coached the middle school soccer team a few years back. He was a heavy-set man who moved with a slow, deliberate lethargy that suggested he had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. He walked through the house with me. He shone his flashlight in the basement corners. He checked the window locks. Looks tight. "Miss Brooks," he said, clicking his light off. "But the noise?" I said, and the gate was unlatched, and I had a package missing. "Porch pirates," Miller said with a shrug. "We have had a rash of them lately, even in Maple Hollow. Kids drive through, grab what they can, and keep moving. Probably hopped your gate to check the back, realized you were home or saw the lawn guy, and took off. And the crying I asked, Jonah was really shaken." "Sound travels funny in these old builds," Miller said, tapping the ductwork above his head. "You share a sewer line with the houses uphill. Sometimes you get an echo down the pipe, or it could be a fox. Foxes sound like screaming children. It is disturbing, but it is nature." He looked at the puddle on the floor, and that I pointed. Condensation. he said. Or maybe your washer has a slow leak. I would call a plumber, not a cop, for that one. He was smiling, trying to be reassuring, but it felt patronizing. He was writing me off as a nervous single mother alone in a big house. So you think nobody was here? I asked. I think your house is secure. Ms. Brooks, if you want, I can have a patrol car do a slow roll past the property tonight, but I do not see any signs of forced entry. He left 10 minutes later. I stood in the driveway and paid Jonah. I gave him an extra $20. I believe you. I told him, even if he does not. Jonah looked at the money, then at me. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. I did not want to sound crazy. He said, so I recorded it. Before I called you, my stomach dropped. You have a recording. He tapped the screen and held the phone out to me. I took it. The volume was turned all the way up. The recording was mostly wind noise, the static of the microphone struggling against the outdoors. Then, the sound of Jonah shifting, crunching gravel, and then, clear as a bell, cutting through the static. It was a sob, a wet, hitching, desperate intake of breath followed by a release of misery. It did not sound like a fox. It did not sound like a pipe. It sounded like a person curled in a ball, trying to keep the noise inside their own throat. It happened again on the recording. 3 seconds later, louder, then Jonah's voice on the recording, whispering, "Hello?" And then the recording ended. I handed the phone back to him. My hand was shaking. "Send that to me," I said. My voice sounded calm, which was a miracle. Jonah texted the file. I watched the little blue progress bar complete. "Go home, Jonah," I said. "Thank you." He got in his truck and drove away. I was alone. I walked back into my house. I locked the deadbolt. I engaged the privacy chain. I went to the back door and checked that lock. I checked the windows in the living room. I stood in the center of the kitchen. The silence was back, but it was no longer a luxury. It was heavy. It was waiting. I played the audio clip again. It was coming from my basement. Jonah had been standing right there. I walked to the basement door. I had closed it after Officer Miller left. I put my hand on the wood. It was cold. I pictured the layout of my basement, the main room, the laundry corner, the storage room in the back where the holiday bins were stacked. It was a concrete box buried in the earth. There was nowhere to hide. Officer Miller had looked behind the furnace. But the smell, that chemical smell. I went to the utility drawer and found a roll of masking tape. I placed a small piece of tape across the seam of the basement door, right near the bottom where it would not be noticed unless you were looking for it. If someone opened that door, the tape would break or peel. It was a trick I had seen in a movie once. It felt ridiculous to do it in my own home. In a suburb where the biggest crime was usually a noise complaint, but the sound of that sobbing was looping in my head. I made dinner a sandwich I could barely swallow. I sat in the living room with the TV on, the volume low, trying to distract myself. Night fell early. The windows turned into black mirrors. Every time the refrigerator kicked on, I jumped. Every time the house settled, the wood expanding and contracting with the temperature change, I froze. Straining to hear footsteps. At 11 o'clock, I went upstairs to my bedroom. I locked my bedroom door. I wedged a chair under the handle. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan. The house was making noises. Usually, I ignored them. The groans of the joists, the click of the thermostat. But tonight, they sounded coordinated. Creak, that was the hallway. Thump, that was the sound of a door closing softly. I sat up, clutching the duvet. I held my breath. Silence, just the wind outside. You are imagining it. I told myself. Miller said it was stress. The audio clip is weird. But maybe it was a radio. Maybe a neighbor's TV was loud and it echoed down the window well. But the gate, the package, the puddle, the smell. Someone had been in my house. And as I lay there in the dark, a terrible, cold certainty settled over me. They were not just in the house. They were still here. I grabbed my phone and opened the text thread with Jonah. I stared at the audio file. I pressed play again, holding the speaker to my ear. The sob was so terrified. It was the sound of someone who had given up hope of being heard. "I am hearing you," I whispered to the dark room. I did not sleep. I lay there, listening to the house breathe, waiting for the sound of the chair under my doorknob sliding across the floor, but nothing came, just the silence, and the crying that I could not hear anymore, but knew was happening, somewhere deep beneath the floorboards. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It only brought a harsh, exposing light to the fear that had kept me awake for 7 hours. I had spent the night sitting in the chair I had wedged against my bedroom door, dozing in fitful, 10-minute bursts, jerking awake at the sound of the refrigerator cycling on or the house settling into the cooling earth. By the time dawn broke, bleeding a pale gray through my curtains, my eyes felt gritty, as if they were filled with sand, and my nerves were pulled as tight as piano wire. I moved the chair away from the door. It made a scraping sound against the hardwood that set my teeth on edge. I showered, letting the hot water run until it turned lukewarm, trying to scrub away the feeling of being watched. I dressed in jeans and a heavy sweater, armor for a day that I knew would not be normal. I called work and told them I had a migraine. It was not entirely a lie. The pressure behind my eyes was throbbing in time with my pulse. At 8 o'clock, I texted Jonah, "Can you come back? I need you to show me exactly where." He replied instantly, "On my way." I waited for him on the front porch with a mug of black coffee that I had no appetite for. The neighborhood was waking up. A school bus rumbled past, its brakes squealing, picking up the children who were not lucky enough to be on the leadership trip. I watched a neighbor 2 doors down retrieve his newspaper. It was all so mundane, so aggressively normal, that I felt a surge of irrational anger. How could the world just keep spinning when my house felt like it had been infected? Jonah pulled up 10 minutes later. He did not park in front of the house this time. He parked down the street, as if he did not want his truck associated with my address for too long. He walked up the driveway, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his canvas jacket. He looked as tired as I felt. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I know this is weird. It is okay." "Ms. Brooks," he said, but he would not meet my eyes. He was looking past me, at the side gate. I kept thinking about it all night. That sound. It sticks with you. "Show me," I said. We walked around to the side yard. The gate was still latched from where I had secured it yesterday. I undid the lock and we stepped into the narrow strip of grass between my house and the fence. The morning dew soaked into my sneakers. Jonah stopped at the window well. It was a semicircular excavation, lined with corrugated galvanized steel, designed to let light into the basement laundry room. A heavy iron grate sat on top, flush with the ground, to prevent people or animals from falling in. "I was right here," Jonah said, pointing to a patch of crushed mulch. I was trimming the burning bush. My head was maybe 2 feet from the grate. I knelt down. The grate was heavy, made of black iron bars spaced 2 inches apart. I gripped the edge and pulled. It groaned, heavy and rusted, but it lifted. I leaned it back against the siding of the house, below. The well was about 4 feet deep. The bottom was filled with gravel for drainage. "Look at the gravel," Jonah said softly. I looked. The gravel in a window well usually settles into a flat, dusty uniform surface, undisturbed except for the occasional dead leaf or spider. But this gravel looked churned. The stones were overturned, exposing the darker, damper sides that should have been facing down, in the center. The gravel was depressed, as if something heavy had rested there. "It looks like someone stood in it," I said. Jonah nodded. "And look at the brick." He pointed to the rough red brick of the foundation, just below the lip of the steel liner. I leaned in closer, squinting against the morning glare. There, about 6 inches down, was a smear. It was dried mud, a reddish-brown streak that contrasted with the weathered brick. It was shaped like a drag mark, wide at the top and tapering down. "That is not a splash from rain," Jonah said. "We have not had rain that hard in weeks. That is a boot scrape, or a knee, like someone was climbing out." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. I looked at the window itself. It was a narrow hopper window, the kind that tilts inward from the top. The glass was caked with years of grime on the outside, but right along the frame. The dirt was disturbed. I reached down, bracing myself with one hand on the cold steel rim of the well. I touched the vinyl frame of the window. There was a crack. It was a hairline fracture running vertically through the bottom corner of the frame, barely visible unless you were looking for it. The white plastic was stressed, whitening at the edges of the crack. It looked fresh. "Someone forced this," I whispered. "They did not break the glass," Jonah said, analyzing it with a contractor's eye. "They popped the frame. If you know how these cheap builder-grade windows work, you can sometimes shim the latch from the outside if the frame has enough give." I stood up, wiping my dusty hands on my jeans. My heart was hammering again, that same erratic rhythm from yesterday. It was not a ghost. "Jonah," I said, "and it was not the wind." "No, ma'am," he said. "Someone was in my basement, and they were crying." Jonah looked at the dark glass. "Why would they break in just to cry?" he asked. "That is the part I do not get. If they wanted to rob you, they would have taken things. If they wanted to squat, they would be quiet. Why sob loud enough to be heard through a closed window? I do not know." I said, "But I'm going to find out." I sent Jonah home again, insisting on paying him for his time, though he tried to refuse. Once he was gone, I stood in the driveway and called a company called North Point Foundation Drainage. They were the most reputable structural firm in the county, the kind of place you called when your foundation was sinking or your basement was flooding. I told the dispatcher I needed an emergency inspection of my window wells and ventilation. I lied and said I smelled gas and sewage, knowing that safety words would get a truck out faster than vague suspicions about intruders. The technician arrived at 11. His name was Silas, a man in his 50s with skin the texture of old leather and a coverall uniform that smelled of damp earth and PVC glue. He carried a heavy flashlight and a clipboard. I walked him to the side of the house. I did not mention the crying. I did not mention the intruder. I pointed to the crack in the frame and the disturbed gravel. "I think I have a drainage issue," I said, keeping my voice steady, "and the window frame looks compromised. I am worried about water getting in." Silas descended into the well with a surprising agility for a heavy man. He poked at the frame. He shone his light through the glass into my basement. He kicked the gravel around. He climbed back out and wiped his hands on a rag. "Your drainage is fine, Mrs. Brooks," he said. "The gravel is deep enough, but that window frame, that is torque damage." "Torque?" I asked. "Pressure," he said, "like someone tried to pry it, or the house shifted hard. But I do not see cracks in the brick, so I am betting on prying." He walked around the perimeter of the house, checking the other vents. He stopped at the intake vent for the furnace, a hooded pipe sticking out of the foundation near the chimney. He tapped it with his flashlight. "You know, this neighborhood is tricky," he said, looking out over the manicured lawns of Maple Hollow. "How so?" "Before they built these houses in the 90s, this land was part of the old textile mill's runoff grid," he said. He spoke about it casually, as if discussing the weather. They had a whole system of service tunnels and storm drains running under these hills. Big concrete pipes. Some of them are big enough to walk in. I stared at him. Under the houses, Silas nodded. Most were collapsed or filled in when they poured the foundations. But not all. Sometimes, builders cut corners. They cap them off and build right over top. We get calls sometimes people hearing echoes, water rushing where there are no pipes. Sound travels weird underground. If you have a breach in your basement seal, you might be hearing the old tunnels breathing. The image made my skin crawl. The idea that beneath my polished hardwood floors and plush carpets, there was a honeycomb of abandoned concrete throats, waiting and echoing. Could someone get in that way, I asked. He laughed, a dry barking sound, into the tunnels. Sure, if they found an open grate in the woods, into your house. Not unless you have a hole in your basement floor the size of a man. He wrote up an invoice for the inspection. I paid him. But his words lingered long after his van disappeared around the corner. Service tunnels, old infrastructure. It made the house feel less like a fortress and more like a fragile shell resting on top of something hollow. I went back inside and locked the door. The silence of the house was different now. It felt heavy, pregnant with secrets. I sat at my kitchen table and opened the app for my smart lock. I had installed the lock 2 years ago, mostly for Lila. She was prone to losing keys, and the keypad allowed her to get in with a code. The app kept a log of every entry and exit, labeled by user. Lila had a code, I had a code, and there was a physical key override, which logged as manual unlock. I scrolled through the history. Yesterday, 5:30 p.m. user Audrey keypad. That was me coming home after Jonah's call. Yesterday, 12:15 p.m. manual unlock. I stopped breathing. At 12:15 yesterday, I was sitting at my desk eating a yogurt and reviewing a spreadsheet. I was 5 miles away. I scrolled back further. Monday, 10:42 a.m. manual unlock. On Monday morning, I was in a meeting with the regional director. Lila was already on the bus. Hours away. 2 entries. 2 times when the house should have been empty. Manual unlock meant a key. It meant someone physically inserted a metal key into the cylinder and turned it. I put the phone down on the table. My hands were trembling. Who had a key? Lila. I thought about my mother, but she lived in Florida and had returned her key after her last visit. I thought about the neighbors. I had never given a spare to Maren Holt next door. Even though we were friendly, I was private that way. That left one person. Daniel, my ex-husband, when we divorced 3 years ago. It had been a mediation, not a war. We divided the assets. We agreed on custody schedules for Lila, and we shook hands. He moved to a condo downtown. He had left his key ring on the counter, the house key, the mailbox key, the shed key. I had seen them there. But Daniel was a creature of habit and redundancy. He was the kind of man who kept 3 spare tires. Of course he would have had a duplicate key made, years ago, just in case, and he would have kept it on his jagged, overloaded keychain, forgotten until he needed it. But why? Why would Daniel come into the house while I was at work? He had no reason to be here. He had no belongings left. We were not fighting over money. Unless he was checking on me, unless he was gaslighting me. The thought made me sick, but it also made sense. It was a tangible answer. It was better than ghosts or strangers in the tunnels. If it was Daniel, I could handle it. I could scream at him. I could get a restraining order. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Audrey. His voice was surprised. Is everything okay? Is it Lila? Lila is fine. I said. My voice was sharp, cutting. I need to ask you something, and I need you not to lie to me. Okay. He sounded wary. What is going on? Did you keep a key to the house? Silence. Then a sigh. Audrey, we have been divorced for 3 years. Why are you asking me this now? Because someone has been entering my house. Daniel, I have logs on the smart lock. Someone used a key yesterday at noon, and Monday morning. And you think it is me? He sounded offended now, his voice rising. You think I am sneaking into your house in the middle of the workday? For what, to steal your Tupperware, I do not know. Daniel, I shouted, losing my composure. I do not know why you would do it, but you are the only other person who ever had a key. I do not have a key. I gave them all back to you. I have not been to Maple Hollow in 6 months. I am at work. Audrey, I can show you my timesheets. I can show you the security footage from my building's garage. He sounded genuine. He sounded like the Daniel I knew, exasperated, defensive, but generally honest. Then who, I asked, my voice breaking. Who else has access? I do not know. Audrey, maybe you gave one to a contractor or a neighbor. No one. I said, look, Daniel said, his voice softening. You are stressed. I know you get anxious when Lila is gone. I did not tell you Lila was gone. The silence on the line was instant and absolute. I gripped the phone. I had not mentioned the trip to him. It was a school event. I signed the permission slip. I paid the fee. It was my week with her. There was no reason for him to know the specific dates. Lila told me, he stammered, when I asked, You said you have not talked to her since Sunday. She texted me. He said, show me the text. I said, screenshot it and send it to me right now. Audrey, you are being paranoid. Send it. Daniel. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He knew. He knew she was away, and he had slipped, but something about it did not fit. If Daniel was sneaking in, why would he be crying in the basement? Daniel did not cry. Daniel got angry. Daniel drank scotch. Daniel did not sob in window wells. And if he knew she was away, where did he get the information Lila might have told him? That was possible. But his reaction, the hesitation, the deflection, it felt like he was covering for something, or someone. I needed to know exactly who knew about this trip. I grabbed my purse and keys. I was going to the school. Maple Hollow High School was a sprawling brick complex that looked more like a community college. I marched into the main office, bypassing the students milling in the hallway during passing period. The air smelled of floor wax and teenage hormones. I need to see the coordinator for the leadership trip. I told the receptionist. She looked at me over her glasses. Do you have an appointment? My daughter is on that trip. I said, leaning on the counter. I have a family emergency and I need to confirm some details about the logistics. She blinked, sensing the edge in my voice. Let me get Mrs. Gable. She is the liaison. Mrs. Gable was a cheerful, fluttery woman in a floral cardigan. She invited me into a small office cluttered with binders and school spirit wear. Mrs. Brooks, is everything all right? Is Lila okay? Lila is fine. I said, I just need to verify something. Who exactly is running this trip? I know it is school sanctioned, but the paperwork said it was sponsored. Oh, yes. Mrs. Gable beamed. We are so lucky. The transportation, the lodge, the food. It is all covered by the Bright Haven Youth Initiative. They are a wonderful local nonprofit. Bright Haven, I repeated. I had seen their logo on banners at the football games, a stylized sun rising over a house. And who from Bright Haven is on the trip, I asked. Well, their program director, Mr. Vance, and a few of their senior volunteers. They handle the logistics. Our teachers just supervise. I nodded. And does Bright Haven have access to the student roster, the parent contact info? Mrs. Gable looked confused. Well, yes. For liability reasons. They need to know dietary restrictions, emergency contacts. Why I am just curious about their vetting process. I said, they are fully vetted. Mrs. Gable assured me. They do great work. They do not just work with schools, you know. They do a lot of community outreach, temporary placements, job training. Temporary placements, I asked. Yes, for adults. You know, people leaving unsafe situations, domestic violence survivors, that sort of thing. They help them get back on their feet. She stopped. Her smile faltered. She looked down at her desk, shuffling a paper. Actually, I am not sure I should be discussing that. It is a separate arm of their organization. Very private, for safety. My mind raced. A youth organization that also hid adults. Adults leaving unsafe situations. Adults who might need to disappear. Does Bright Haven have a physical office, I asked? Mrs. Gable nodded. Over on Elm Street, in the old Medical Arts building. I thanked her and left. As I walked back to my car, the pieces were floating in my head, refusing to connect but brushing against each other. Lila's trip, sponsored by a group that moves vulnerable adults. Daniel knowing the dates, the crying in my basement a sound of despair. Not malice. Was it possible? Was it possible that my house, sitting empty and quiet in the suburbs, had been marked not for robbery, but for use? I drove home, my eyes scanning every car that passed me, a white van, a sedate sedan. Everyone looked suspicious now. I pulled into my driveway at 3 p.m. The house looked peaceful. The shadows were lengthening across the lawn. I unlocked the front door. I stepped inside. The air in the house was stale. I walked to the kitchen and dropped my keys. Then I saw it. The door to the basement was at the end of the hallway, at the top of the stairs. On the wall outside the door was the light switch. I had left the basement lights on yesterday when I ran up to call the police. I remembered the cold fluorescent hum, but after Officer Miller left, I had turned them off. I was sure of it. I had stood there, hand on the toggle, listening to the silence before flipping it down. I was obsessive about lights. It was a habit from the days when money was tight. The switch was up. I stared at it, the small plastic toggle jutting upward. I did not move. I listened. Silence. I walked slowly down the hall. I reached the door. I put my hand on the knob. It was warm. Not hot, just warm. Like a hand had been resting there recently. I pushed the door open. The lights below were blazing. The concrete floor was illuminated. The boxes were exactly where I had left them, but the air was different. Yesterday, it had smelled of adhesive. Today, it smelled of bleach. Sharp, sterile, stinging chlorine bleach. Someone had cleaned. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down into the bright, artificial hole of my basement. They had a key. They knew my schedule. They knew my daughter was gone. And they were comfortable enough to clean up after themselves. I backed away. I did not go down the stairs. I went to the kitchen and grabbed my purse. I needed eyes. I needed to see what was happening when I wasn't there. I couldn't rely on smart locks or muddy footprints anymore. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove to the electronics store. I was done guessing. I was done asking my ex-husband for truths he didn't have. I was going to catch them. The electronics store was a brightly lit purgatory of choices I did not want to make. I stood in the aisle surrounded by smart home devices, feeling conspicuously like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. I did not want a camera that looked like a friendly robot or a doorbell that greeted visitors. I wanted eyes that could see in the dark. I wanted evidence. I purchased 2 small black cubes that promised high-definition night vision and motion-activated recording to a cloud server. They were expensive, nearly $400 for the pair, but the price felt irrelevant. I would have paid double. I added a high-end SD card to the basket, a redundant backup in case the Wi-Fi failed. Driving home, I felt a grim sense of purpose. The fear from the morning, the discovery of the switched light. The smell of bleach had hardened into a cold, tactical anger. Someone was playing a game with my sanctuary. They were walking through my rooms, flipping my switches, cleaning my floors. They were making themselves at home while I was at work. I spent the next hour installing the eyes. I placed the first camera in the kitchen, tucked into the foliage of a large pathos plant that sat on top of the refrigerator. The lens peeked through the vines, invisible unless you were on a ladder looking for it. It had a clear view of the back door and the open archway that led to the living room. The second camera was the critical one. I went to the hallway that led to the basement. There was a narrow bookshelf against the wall, filled with Lila's old paperbacks and a few decorative vases. I cleared a space on the middle shelf, pushing a row of books forward, and wedged the camera in the shadows behind them. I angled it downward. It had a perfect, unimpeded view of the basement door and the top 3 steps of the staircase. If anyone opened that door, coming or going, I would see them. I synced them to my phone. The live feed popped up on my screen, too static. Fisheye views of my empty house. It looked peaceful. It looked safe. I knew it was neither. I was sitting at the kitchen island, watching the feeds, when a knock on the front door made me jump. It was Jonah. He was holding a pair of heavy-duty work gloves and looking uncomfortable. His truck was idling at the curb, the engine rumbling. "Ms. Brooks," he said when I opened the door. "I left my rake behind the hedge yesterday. Just wanted to grab it." I nodded. "Go ahead." "Jonah," he hesitated. He didn't move toward the hedge. He stood on the porch, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He looked like he was wrestling with something. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He looked at me, his young face serious. "I cannot stop thinking about it." He said, "The sound. Me neither." I admitted, "I did not tell you yesterday." He said, lowering his voice as if the neighborhood shrubs might be listening, "because I thought it sounded crazy, but I have heard it before." My hands went cold. "You have—" "About 6 months ago," Jonah said, "I was doing a clean-out for a listing over on Oak Street, the big brick one on the corner. It was vacant. The owners had moved out in a hurry. I knew the house. It was a beautiful property that had sat empty for weeks, then suddenly had a sold sign slapped on it. I was in the backyard, mowing, Jonah continued, and I heard it coming from the crawlspace vent. Just like at your place. That same hitching sob, like someone trying to catch their breath after crying for hours. What did you do? I asked. I knocked on the door, Jonah said. I thought maybe a squatter had gotten in, or a kid, but nobody answered. And then a guy in a suit showed up, said he was the property manager. He told me to pack up and leave, said they were bringing in a specialist team for repairs. Did you see the guy's name? Or the company? Jonah shook his head. No, but the house sold 2 weeks later, and the weird thing is, the family that lived there before the Millers, they were nice folks, lived there for 10 years. Then one day, boom, they are gone. People said it was a job transfer, but they left a lot of stuff on the curb. Good stuff, like they just ran. I stared at him. The pattern was forming, hazy, but undeniable. Thank you for telling me. Jonah, I said. He nodded, grabbed his rake from the bushes, and walked back to his truck. He drove away fast, like he did not want to linger in Maple Hollow any longer than he had to. I needed air. I walked out to the mailbox, mostly to give myself something to do that felt normal. Maren Holt was in her driveway, wrestling a bag of potting soil out of her trunk. Maren was the neighborhood historian, a woman who knew the property lines and tax assessments of every home within a 3-mile radius. Audrey, she called out, waving a gloved hand, looks like you are holding down the fort alone. Lila is off conquering the wilderness, something like that, I said, walking over to the property line. She wiped her forehead. Quiet week in the hollow, she said. Except for the movers. Have you noticed movers? I asked, trying to sound casual. 3 houses in 2 months. Maren said, leaning against her car. The Millers on Oak, the Davidsons on Elm, and now the little Cape Cod down by the park. All of them sold before they even hit the main listing sites. That is fast, I said. It is aggressive. Maren corrected. It is this new group, Crestline Property Solutions. You see their signs? They are distinct, navy blue with 2 interlocking C's. They do not look like normal realtor signs. They look like construction warnings. Crestline, I repeated. The name sat heavy on my tongue. Nobody knows who runs it, Maren said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. My sister is a paralegal for a title company in the city. She says they buy with cash. No mortgages. They swoop in, do some rapid renovations, mostly unseen stuff like foundation work or mold remediation, and then flip it to a rental holding company or a new buyer within 60 days. Why the renovations? I asked. The houses here are good. Water damage, Maren said, rolling her eyes. Apparently, that is what the permits say, which is a laugh, considering we are on a hill and the drainage here is excellent, but suddenly everyone has a flooded basement or a burst pipe, and suddenly they are selling to Crestline for cash. I felt a phantom chill, thinking of the puddle on my basement floor, the clear, cold water that smelled of nothing. It is predatory, if you ask me. Maren sniffed, catching people when they are desperate. I excused myself, my heart rate picking up speed. I walked back into my house, locked the door, and went straight to my laptop. I sat at the kitchen table and typed Crestline Property Solutions into the search bar. The results were sparse. A landing page with a generic stock photo of a happy family and a contact us form. No team photos, no about us story, just a slogan resolving property burdens with dignity. I switched to the county assessor's public database. I searched for recent transfers in Maple Hollow. There it was, 1402 Oak Street, sold to Crestline Holdings, LLC, for $350,000. 3 months later, transferred to Titanium Rentals, Inc., for $500,000. I checked the permit history for the address. Permit number 4492, emergency remediation, water intrusion and structural drying. I checked the Davidson house on Elm, same pattern. Sold to Crestline. Permit for basement waterproofing and mold removal. I checked the Cape Cod by the park. Sump pump failure and sanitation. They were manufacturing disasters. My mind went back to the puddle in my basement. It was small, insignificant, but what if it was just the start? What if the crying wasn't a ghost, but a siren? A noise designed to make a homeowner investigate, to find a leak, to call a contractor. But who was the contractor? I thought of the sticker Jonah had found. The two interlocking C's. I closed the laptop. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the kitchen floor. The house was darkening. I checked the camera feeds on my phone. Nothing, just the gray stillness of the empty hallway and the silent kitchen. I made tea. I did not drink it. I paced. Night fell completely. The streetlights flickered on outside, amber pools in the darkness. I sat on the living room sofa, my phone propped up against a pillow, the screen glowing. I was watching my own house in real time. At 9 o'clock, the wind picked up, rattling the storm door. At 10 o'clock, the refrigerator went into a defrost cycle. A sudden hum that made me flinch. At 11:15, the motion notification banner slid across the top of my screen. Motion detected, basement hallway. My breath caught in my throat. I tapped the notification. The video feed loaded. It was in black and white night vision, which made everything look ghostly and silver. The camera was looking down from the bookshelf. It showed the white door of the basement and the carpeted runner of the hallway. The door was opening. It did not burst open. It turned slowly. The handle rotated with a mechanical smoothness. The door drifted inward, revealing the black maw of the staircase. A figure stepped out. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, even though I was alone. The figure was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up tight. They were wearing gloves. They stepped out of the basement and onto the hallway runner. They did not look like an intruder breaking in. They looked like someone leaving a room they had been occupying. They stood there for a moment, head cocked, listening. Then, they turned back toward the open basement door. They were not leaving the basement. They had come up to check something, maybe the sound of the house settling, maybe just to stretch, and now they were going back down. But before they descended, they paused. They leaned against the doorframe, and then, the audio feed on my phone crackled. It was soft at first, a low, rhythmic huffing. Hoo, hoo. Then it built. Oh God, please, someone. It was the crying. It was the exact sound Jonah had recorded. It was a weeping, broken sound that made my skin prickle with instinctual empathy. It sounded like a child. It sounded like a woman in pain. The figure in the hoodie stood perfectly still while they made the sound. Their body language was relaxed, bored even. They were leaning against the wood, one hand picking at a loose thread on their sleeve, while their throat produced the sounds of absolute agony. Then, abruptly, the crying stopped. The figure cleared their throat, a normal, flat sound. Then they whispered. The microphone picked it up. A sibilant hiss. Too much breath. Tighten it up. They took a breath and started again. A different pitch this time. Higher. More frantic. Mommy, Mommy, are you there? It was a performance. They were practicing. I watched, frozen in horror, as the figure adjusted their hood, stepped back into the darkness of the stairs, and pulled the door shut behind them. The latch clicked. The feed went still. I was shaking so hard I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood. I scrambled to pick it up. I dialed 911. I did not care about sounding crazy. There was a person in my basement. A person who practiced sounding like a dying child. He is inside, I whispered to the dispatcher. He is in the basement right now. I have him on camera. The police arrived in 6 minutes. 2 cars. Sirens silent. Lights flashing. I met them at the front door. It was Officer Miller again, accompanied by a younger female officer I did not recognize. He is down there, I said, pointing to the hallway. I saw him. Stay here, Miller said. They drew their weapons. They moved with professional speed. They went to the basement door. Miller tried the handle. It was locked. He kicked it. The wood splintered near the jamb and the door flew open. Police. Come out with your hands up. They descended. I heard their boots heavy on the stairs. I heard them shouting clear commands. Left side clear. Storage room clear. I waited in the kitchen, hugging my elbows, listening to the invasion of my home. 5 minutes later, Miller came back up. He was holstering his gun. He looked annoyed. "Ms. Brooks, the basement is empty." "No," I said. "That is impossible. I saw him go back down. There is no way out. The window is too small." "We checked the window," Miller said. "It is painted shut. We checked the closets. We checked the furnace room. There is nobody down there." I showed him the video. "Look," I said, thrusting my phone at him. "Look at this." He watched the grainy footage. He watched the figure step out, cry, and step back in. He frowned. "When was this taken? 10 minutes ago. Right before I called you." He watched it again. "It is weird," he admitted. "But Ms. Brooks, we searched every inch. Unless this guy can walk through walls, he is not there. Maybe he is hiding in the ceiling," I asked frantically. "Maybe under the floor," Miller sighed. "It is a finished basement. Drywall and concrete. There are no trap doors. Look, this video. It is dark. It is grainy. Shadows can look like people sometimes. And audio can be anything. Electronic interference." "You hear him speaking?" I shouted. "He says, 'Tighten it up.'" "I hear a murmur." Miller said, "Could be the pipes. Could be a radio frequency interference. These cheap Wi-Fi cameras pick up baby monitors from 3 houses away sometimes." He was doing it again. He was rationalizing it away. He was refusing to see the malice because it did not fit his paperwork. "So you are telling me I imagined a person in a hoodie. I am saying there is nobody in your house right now." Miller said firmly, "We can file a report for suspicious activity, but without a suspect or signs of forced entry, there is not much we can do." They left. I locked the door behind them. I felt a scream building in my chest, a hot, expanding pressure. They were wrong. I knew they were wrong. I grabbed a flashlight from the utility drawer. I grabbed a hammer. I walked to the basement door. The jamb was splintered from Miller's kick. I pushed it open. I went down the stairs. I turned on every light, the overhead fluorescents, the lamp in the corner. The basement was bright and cold. It smelled of bleach again. I walked the perimeter. I tapped the walls with the hammer. Thud, thud, thud. Solid drywall over studs. I went to the stairs. The staircase was a simple wooden structure, carpeted down the center, open on the sides. Beneath the stairs was a storage closet filled with suitcases and winter coats. Miller had looked in there. I looked in there. Nothing but luggage. I backed out and looked at the side of the staircase, the stringer, the zigzagging piece of wood that held the steps. I shone my flashlight along the white paint. It was scuffed from years of shoes and vacuum cleaners. But near the 3rd step from the bottom, something caught the light. A screw. It was a Phillips head screw, sunk into the wood. The head was shiny, silver. All the other screws in the stringer were painted over. They were covered in layers of white latex from the last 3 times we had painted the basement. This one was bare metal. It had been removed and put back in. I knelt down. I ran my thumb over it. There were no paint flakes around the edge. It was clean. I looked at the piece of wood it was holding. It was a triangular panel of plywood that enclosed the side of the staircase. It looked seamless. The trim piece along the top hid the joint. But down here, near the floor, I saw it, a seam. It was a hair-thin line running vertically behind the leg of the heavy metal shelving unit I used for pantry overflow. The shelf was full of canned tomatoes and paper towels. It was heavy. I put my shoulder against the shelf and pushed. It didn't budge. I put the hammer down and used both hands. Bracing my feet against the floor, I shoved with everything I had. The shelf grated against the concrete, screeching, and slid 2 inches to the left. Behind it, the seam was visible. It wasn't just a seam. It was a cut. A rectangular section of the wall, about 3 feet high, had been cut out and put back in place, disguised by the trim. The shiny screw was the latch. My hand reached for the screwdriver on the workbench. I wanted to open it. I wanted to rip it off and scream at whoever was crouching in the dark void beneath my stairs. But my hand stopped in midair. If I opened it, and he was there, what would I do? I had a hammer. He had... I didn't know what he had. And if I opened it and he wasn't there, I would be destroying the evidence. I would be stripping the screw, chipping the paint. Officer Miller would come back and say I had done it myself in a fit of hysteria. I needed a witness, a real one, not a cop who wanted to get back to his coffee. I stepped back. I pushed the shelf back in place. Careful to line it up exactly with the dust marks on the floor, I went upstairs, backing away, keeping the hammer raised. I locked the basement door. I wedged a chair under the handle. I went to the kitchen and found the scrap of paper Jonah had written on for me yesterday. My aunt knows a guy, private security, used to be FBI or something. Name is Morrow. I pulled up the number for Morrow Security Consulting. It was a mobile number. It was 1 a.m. I dialed. It rang 4 times. Morrow. A woman's voice answered. Crisp, awake. I need help. I said, My name is Audrey Brooks. I am in Maple Hollow. The police say I am alone, but I found a screw that shouldn't be there. There was a pause, a silence that felt intelligent. Assessing. Describe the screw. Audrey. It is silver, I said, unpainted, on the stair stringer, and there is a cut in the drywall behind the shelf. Do not touch it, the woman said. Do not open it. Do not go back down there. I won't. Are you safe right now? I am locked in the kitchen. I will be there in 20 minutes, she said. Keep the line open. Put the phone in your pocket. If you hear a sound, scream. I stood in the center of my kitchen, the hammer in my hand, waiting for the cavalry, while the house settled around me, groaning with secrets I was finally starting to understand. Elise Morrow arrived at 2:14 in the morning. She did not look like the cavalry. She looked like a librarian who had spent too much time at a firing range. She was a small woman, wiry and compact, wearing a gray raincoat over a dark turtleneck. She carried a hard-shell pelican case instead of a purse. I opened the door, still gripping the hammer. You can put that down. Audrey, she said. Her voice was low, devoid of the patronizing, soothing tone Officer Miller had used. It was a professional voice. If someone comes through that door, the hammer is not going to help you as much as I will. I lowered the hammer, but did not put it down. I led her into the kitchen. The house felt cavernous and hostile, every shadow a potential hiding spot. Tell me about the screw, Elise said, setting her case on the island. I told her. I told her about the shiny head on the painted stringer. I told her about the seam behind the shelf. I told her about the crying, the switched lights, the smell of bleach, and the figure on the camera that the police insisted was a shadow. She listened without interrupting. She did not nod. She did not offer sympathy. She just absorbed the data, her eyes scanning the room, checking the sightlines. Show me the video, she said. I handed her my phone. She watched the clip of the hooded figure 4 times. She zoomed in. She adjusted the brightness on her own screen. That is not a shadow, she said finally. That is a male, approximately 5'10", wearing soft-soled shoes. Look at the way he shifts his weight. He is comfortable. He is not rushing. She looked up at me, and the audio I played the sound, the sobbing, the hiss of tighten it up. Elise's expression tightened. That is not organic, she said. What do you mean? The acoustic signature is wrong, she said. She opened her case and pulled out a device that looked like a complex stud finder with an antenna. If he was standing in the hallway, the sound would bounce off the drywall. It would be brighter. This sounds muffled, like it is coming from inside a container. Or, she trailed off. She picked up a heavy flashlight. Let's go downstairs. But the police did a cursory sweep for an active shooter. Elise said, they looked for a person standing in the middle of the room. We are looking for something else. We went down. The basement was exactly as I had left it, cold, bright, smelling of bleach. Elise moved differently than the cops. She did not stomp. She glided. She swept her light along the baseboards, checking for dust disturbance. She looked at the vents. She stopped at the main air return, a large grate near the ceiling that sucked air back to the furnace. She held up a strip of tissue paper. The suction pulled it tight against the metal. Strong airflow, she muttered. She walked to the laundry area, where the window well was. She looked at the crack in the frame I had found with Jonah. Shimmed, she said. Professional entry tool. They popped the lock, slid in, and popped it back. She turned her attention to the shelving unit where I had found the hidden panel. She ran her hand along the seam I had discovered. "Do not open it yet," she commanded softly as I stepped forward. Why he might be in there. If he was in there, he would have come out when the cops kicked the door in. Or he is gone. If we open it now, we tip our hand. Look at the paint. She shone her light at an oblique angle. "There is a hair stuck in the paint," she said, "and a fingerprint in the dust on the trim. If we pry this, we ruin the forensic value. But more importantly," she turned away from the panel and walked toward the center of the room. She stood still, closing her eyes. "Where exactly did Jonah hear the crying?" she asked. "From the window well, outside. And where did you hear it?" "From the kitchen. It sounded like it was coming up the stairs." Elise nodded. She walked over to the metal shelving unit, not the one hiding the panel, but a smaller one near the furnace, filled with old paint cans. It was directly under a heating vent that branched off to the upstairs. She crouched down. She shone her light upward. "Under the bottom shelf. There," she said. I knelt beside her. Taped to the underside of the metal shelf, hidden deep in the back corner where shadows naturally pooled, was a small black rectangle. It was about the size of a deck of cards. A tiny blue LED light blinked on its side, a slow, rhythmic pulse in the darkness. "It is a Bluetooth speaker," Elise said. "High output, long battery life." She reached out with a gloved hand and carefully peeled the tape back. She held the device in her palm. She turned it over. It was vibrating slightly. "It is playing," she whispered. I leaned in. I could hear nothing. "It is a silent track right now," she explained. "It is a loop. 10 minutes of silence, then 30 seconds of audio, then silence. They tape it here, angled at the metal ductwork. The metal acts as an amplifier. It carries the sound up into the vents so you hear it in the kitchen, and it carries it out the intake so Jonah hears it in the yard. It throws the sound. Ventriloquism with HVAC. I stared at the black plastic box. It was not a ghost. It was not a child trapped in a wall. It was not even a person crying in the moment. It was a recording. A wave of nausea hit me. I had to grab the workbench to steady myself. The relief was instantaneous. No one was dying in my house, but it was immediately replaced by a cold, creeping horror that was almost worse. Someone had recorded that sound. Someone had come into my home, taped this device under a shelf, and set it to play specifically to terrify me. It was psychological torture. It was engineered. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would they do this to destabilize you?" Elise said. Placing the speaker into an evidence bag she pulled from her pocket. "To make you doubt your senses. To make you think the house is haunted, or broken, or cursed. To make you leave." She pulled out her phone and opened a Bluetooth scanner app. "Let's see who owns it," she said. The app scanned the room. A list of devices popped up. Audrey's iPhone, Samsung TV, and one more, Crestline OPS3. I stared at the screen. The name was right there. They had not even bothered to hide it. They were so arrogant, so sure that no one would ever look under the bottom shelf of a paint rack, that they had left the default device name, Crestline, I said, "the real estate group." Elise looked at me sharply. "You know them. My neighbor told me." I said, "They have been buying up houses in the neighborhood, cash offers, quick flips. She said they target houses with water damage." Elise looked at the puddle on the floor. Then at the speaker in the bag. "They create the distress," she said. "They plant the sound to make you call a contractor, or they plant a leak to make you file a claim. Then they swoop in and buy the problem property cheap. It is a blockade strategy. They force you out by making the house uninhabitable, psychologically or physically." She walked back to the hidden panel under the stairs. "And this," she said, gesturing to the seam, "this is not for water damage. This is a drop. A drop, if they have keys, and they have a hidden compartment. They are using your house as a dead drop, probably for moving things they do not want found during a standard audit. Documents, cash, drives. Your house is a safe house for a corporate crime ring. Audrey, and you are just the inconvenient roommate." She turned to me, her face serious. You need to leave. Audrey, tonight. Pack a bag. Go to a hotel. Go to your mother's. Do not stay here. I looked at the stairs. I looked at the evidence bag. I thought about the figure in the hoodie. I cannot. I said, Audrey, this is not a debate. These people are sophisticated. They have access to your home. They are gaslighting you with audio loops. You are not safe. Lila comes home in 2 days. I said, my daughter. She was on a bus, heading back from her trip. A trip sponsored by Brighthaven, a partner of the people doing this. If I leave, I said, my voice trembling but hardening, and they come back. What happens when Lila walks in if I go to a hotel? I leave the house to them. They could change the locks. They could do anything. And when the bus drops her off, I might not be able to get to her. I took a breath. I am not leaving my house. Elise, I am not letting them take it. Elise studied me. She saw the set of my jaw. She nodded, accepting the logic of a mother, even if it defied the logic of security. Okay, she said. Then we fortify. We spent the next 4 hours turning my house into a trap. Elise checked every window. She reinforced the strike plate on the basement door with 3-inch screws she had in her kit. She set up a secondary network for my cameras. Bypassing the main router in case they tried to jam it, she left at 6 a.m, promising to monitor the feeds remotely from her office. Get some sleep. Audrey, she said, but do not go in the basement alone, and do not unlock that side gate. I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table as the sun came up, staring at the contact information for Brighthaven Youth Initiative. The connection was too tight. Daniel knew the dates because Lila told him, but Brighthaven sponsored the trip. Brighthaven moved vulnerable adults. Crestline moved into empty houses. I dialed the number for Brighthaven at 9 o'clock sharp. Brighthaven, how can we help you shine? The receptionist chirped. My name is Audrey Brooks. I said, my daughter is on the leadership trip. Oh, yes, the bus is scheduled to return tomorrow afternoon. I know. I said, I have a question about your partners. I understand you work with local businesses for logistics. We do, she said. We are very community-focused. I found some equipment in my home, I said, lying smoothly, labeled with a Crestline tag. I was told they are a partner of yours. The line went dead silent. The chirpy tone evaporated instantly. I am sorry, ma'am. What did you say your name was? Audrey Brooks. Mrs. Brooks. We do not discuss partner operations or vendor agreements with parents. That is confidential administrative data. I just want to know if anyone from your organization has been in my house. I said, because I found a device, Mrs. Brooks. The receptionist interrupted, her voice hard and brittle. I think you are confused. Brighthaven is a youth charity. We do not have equipment in private residences. If you have a complaint, you can submit it in writing to the board. She hung up. She did not ask what the equipment was. She did not ask why I thought it was them. She shut it down. That was an answer in itself. I grabbed my keys. I needed to be in motion. I felt like a sitting duck in the kitchen. I drove to the Maple Hollow Community Credit Union. I needed to check my accounts, if they were messing with my house. Were they messing with my money? The bank was cool and quiet. I sat across from a teller named Sarah, a woman I had known since high school. I need to check for any unusual activity. I said, on the mortgage or the checking? Sarah typed, her long nails clicking on the keyboard. Everything looks normal. Audrey, she said, balance is accurate. No weird withdrawals. I exhaled. Okay. Good. Wait, Sarah said. She frowned. There is a flag here. From yesterday. What flag? A change of address request, she said. It was submitted online. Change to where? She turned the screen. P.O. Box 492, Downtown Station. I did not authorize that. I said, my voice rising. I live in my house. I am not moving. Sarah immediately clicked a button. I am freezing it, she said. I am rejecting the request. She leaned over the counter, lowering her voice. Audrey, you are the third one this month, she whispered. What, 2 other women? Single owners, one on Oak, one on Elm. They both had unauthorized address changes pop up right before they sold their houses. They came in here crying, saying they never listed their homes, but the paperwork was already going through. It is theft. I said, they are stealing the titles. Sarah shook her head. It is more complicated. They redirect the mail, the bills, the notices. You stop getting your mortgage statement. You stop getting the water bill. You miss payments you do not know you are missing. Then they trigger a default or a lien. And then a company like Crestline swoops in and offers to save you. I finished. Sarah looked terrified. Be careful. Audrey, this is not just kids hacking passwords. This is organized. I left the bank with my accounts frozen and a fraud alert on my credit file. I felt heavy, like I was wading through wet cement. It was a siege. They attacked the house structure. They attacked the mind with sound. They attacked the finances with paper. When I got back to the driveway, Jonah was there. He was on his knees in the window well again. Jonah, I called out. He jumped up. He looked pale. I came back to check the other wells. He said, just in case. And I found this. He held out his hand. In his dirty palm lay a piece of white plastic. It was a badge clip, the kind that retracts on a spring. It was snapped in half, jagged plastic showing where it had been stepped on or crushed. On the remaining half of the round plastic casing, there was a logo. It was blue, 2 interlocking C's. I stared at it. It was the physical anchor to the digital ghost. Crestline OPS 3. The badge clip matched. Where did you find it? I asked. Buried in the gravel, Jonah said. Deep down. Like someone stepped on it, broke it, and kicked gravel over it to hide it. I took the clip. It felt cheap and brittle. They were here. Jonah. I said, they were inside. He looked at the house, his eyes wide. What are you going to do? He asked. I am going to wait. I said. The rest of the day was a blur of tension. I moved through the house like a ghost in my own life. I ate toast standing up over the sink. I drank water. I watched the cameras. Elise texted me at 6. I am monitoring. System is stable. Stay out of the basement. I sat in the living room. The lights off. The curtains drawn. I had the live feed of the basement hallway on my iPad, propped up against a vase. The house settled. The wind blew. At 11 o'clock, nothing. At midnight, nothing. I started to drift. My head nodded forward. Then, the iPad screen flashed white. Motion detected. I snapped awake. I grabbed the tablet. The camera in the kitchen was clear. Nothing. I switched to the basement hallway view. The door was open again. I had locked it. I had wedged a chair under it. The chair was pushed aside. Sliding silently on the hardwood, the lock had been picked. A figure was coming up the stairs. This time, it was not the hoodie. It was a woman. She was young, maybe late 20s. She wore black cargo pants and a tight black long-sleeve shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail. She did not look like a burglar. She looked like a technician. She stepped into the hallway. She held a phone to her ear. She looked annoyed. She was not whispering. She was speaking in a low, urgent tone, but clearly enough for the microphone to catch it. She scanned the hallway. She looked right at the bookshelf where my camera was hidden, but she did not see it. She looked past it. We have a problem, she said into the phone. The speaker is gone. She listened for a moment. No, not malfunction. Gone. The tape was peeled. She found it. She paced a small circle on the runner. Yeah. Well, the panel is still sealed, she said. But if she found the speaker, she knows. She knows it is not a ghost. She paused, listening to the voice on the other end. Her face went hard. Okay, she said. Copy that. She looked back down the dark stairs. We move the inventory tonight, she said. Get the van. She is just one woman. If she wakes up, we handle it. She hung up. She turned and slipped back into the basement, pulling the door shut until it clicked. My heart stopped. Move tonight. We handle it. They were not just trying to scare me anymore. They were coming to empty the vault beneath my stairs. And if I got in the way, they were going to remove me. I looked at the time. 12:42. I looked at the phone in my hand. I could call the police. Miller would come. He would knock on the door. The woman would hide in the panel. Miller would find nothing. He would leave. And then they would come out. I could call Elise, but she was 20 minutes away. I heard a sound from below, a heavy scraping sound, the sound of a metal shelf being dragged across concrete. They were opening the wall. I stood up. I picked up the hammer. I picked up the phone. I was not going to wait for Miller. I was not going to wait for them to come upstairs and handle me. I pressed the record button on the camera app. I was going to catch them. My hand was on the doorknob, the metal cold against my sweating palm, the hammer heavy in my other hand. I was ready to throw the door open and confront the woman who was standing in my hallway, planning to erase me. Then my phone buzzed. It was a single, sharp vibration against the screen I was clutching. I glanced down, expecting to see the recording timer ticking away. Instead, a banner notification from Elise flashed across the top. Do not engage. Look at the driveway cam. I froze. The adrenaline that had been propelling me forward suddenly curdled into ice. I swiped to the exterior camera view. A dark cargo van was idling at the curb, lights off. 2 figures were standing by the back doors, smoking cigarettes. They were big men. They were not wearing technician clothes. They were wearing bulky jackets that suggested they were ready for something physical. I was one woman with a claw hammer. They were a team. Elise called me a second later. I answered in a whisper, retreating into the kitchen shadows. "Audrey," she said, her voice hard and urgent, "lock the door. Go back to your room. If you go down there now, you lose. They are not moving the inventory yet. She is prepping the site. If you interrupt them, they will panic. And panic makes people violent." I watched the screen. The woman in the hallway finished her call, cast one last look at the camera she didn't know I had found, and slipped back into the basement. A moment later, the side door chime on my security system dinged softly. She had exited through the basement walkout. I watched on the driveway camera as she jogged to the van. The men tossed their cigarettes. They all got in. The van rolled away, disappearing into the suburban darkness. I slumped against the refrigerator, sliding down until I hit the floor. The hammer clattered onto the tile. "They are gone," I whispered. "For now." Elise said, "But they are coming back." She said, "Tonight. That means we have hours. I am coming over. Do not touch anything." Elise arrived 30 minutes later. She did not park in the driveway. She parked 2 streets over and walked through the neighbor's yard, coming in through the back gate to avoid being seen by anyone watching the front. She found me in the kitchen, staring at a cardboard box I had pulled from the recycling bin. "We need to be smarter than them," I said. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. "They think I am just a nuisance, a single mother who hears noises. They do not think I am a threat. That is our advantage," Elise said. She opened her hard case and took out a small, round disc. It was a GPS tracker, the kind people use for luggage. But this one looked modified. The casing was stripped off, leaving just the raw electronics. "We set the trap," she said. We went down to the basement. The air still held the faint, sterile scent of the bleach they had used to clean up their earlier mess. I approached the hidden panel under the stairs. I wanted to tear it open. I wanted to see what was so important that they would terrorize a family to hide it. "Leave it," Elise ordered. "If you open it, they will know the site is compromised. They will abort the pickup and burn the evidence. We need them to take it." She took the GPS tracker and taped it inside the bottom flap of the cardboard box I had brought down. It was an innocuous box, originally for a blender. We filled the box with old tax papers, shredded documents that looked official but were meaningless. Then, Elise took a large manila envelope. She took a thick black marker and wrote one word on it in block letters, "Insurance." She placed the envelope inside the box, right on top, so it would be the first thing anyone saw if they opened it. "We place this right here," she said, shoving the box into the cavity of the metal shelf. "Just inches from the hidden panel. It looks like you were reorganizing storage. If they are moving inventory in a hurry, they might grab this too. Especially with that label. It is a long shot." I said, "It is a crumb," she corrected. Criminals in a panic make mistakes. They grab everything that looks like a liability. If they take this box, we track them back to the hive. We went back upstairs. The sun was beginning to lighten the sky, turning the black windows to a bruised purple. I had not slept in 24 hours. I made coffee. Elise sat at the table, monitoring the feeds. At 7 in the morning, my personal cell phone chirped. It was a text message. The number was blocked. I picked it up, expecting it to be work asking where I was. The message was in all caps. "Stop digging or your daughter gets hurt." The world dropped out from under me. The kitchen, the coffee smell, the sunlight, it all vanished. All I saw were those words. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor. Hot coffee splashing my ankles. But I didn't feel it. "Lila," I gasped. I grabbed the phone and tried to dial her number. My fingers were slipping on the glass. "Audrey, stop," Elise said, moving instantly to my side. She saw the text. Her face went grim. "They have her," I screamed. "They know she is coming home. They have her." "Think," Elise said, gripping my shoulders. "Think. Where is she right now?" "She is on the bus," I sobbed. "She is coming home from the lodge." "Call the school," Elise commanded. "Do not call Lila. If they have her phone, you do not want to tip them off. Call the chaperone, now." I dialed the emergency line for the school trip. It rang and rang. "Pick up," I begged. "Please pick up." "Hello?" A woman's voice. Sleepy. It was Mrs. Gable. "Mrs. Gable. This is Audrey Brooks, Lila's mother. Is she with you?" "I need to see her. Right now. Mrs. Brooks. We are just loading the luggage. We are not even on the road yet. Is Lila there? Is she physically with you?" "Yes. She is right here. She is eating a bagel. Do you want to talk to her?" I let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. "Yes, please." A moment later, Lila's voice came on the line, groggy, annoyed, completely normal. "Mom. What is going on?" "It is 7 in the morning. Lila," I breathed. I missed you. I just wanted to make sure you were getting on the bus okay." "Mom, you are being weird. I am fine. I will see you in 5 hours. I love you," I said. "Stay with the group. Do not go anywhere alone. Promise me." Okay, I promise. Love you too." She hung up. I stood there, shaking. The phone pressed to my chest. She was safe. She was 300 miles away, eating a bagel. "It is a bluff," Elise said softly. I looked at the text again. "Stop digging." They timed it. I said, my voice trembling with rage. "They waited until morning. They knew I would be awake. They wanted to break me." This confirms 2 things. Elise said, 1, they are watching you in real time. They saw us go into the basement. They saw us plotting. And 2, they are scared. People do not threaten children unless they are losing control of the situation. But how did they know I asked? How did they know I was digging? The cameras are inside. The blinds are drawn. Elise walked to the back door. She peered out through the slats of the blinds, scanning the backyard. "The leaves are falling," she said. "The sightlines are opening up." She unlocked the door and slipped out, staying low. I watched her from the window. She moved toward the tree line at the back of my property, where the manicured lawn gave way to a strip of dense woods that separated my lot from the old access road behind the subdivision. She stopped at a large oak tree about 50 feet from the house. She reached up into the branches. When she came back inside, she was holding a trail camera. It was painted in camouflage, the kind hunters use to track deer. "It was pointed right at your kitchen window," she said, setting it on the table. "It has a cellular uplink. They have been watching you make coffee. They saw us talking. They saw your body language." I felt violated in a way that made my skin crawl. My home was not a fortress. It was a stage, and they were the audience. "I am going to the police," I said. "I do not care what Miller says. I have a threat against my child. I have a speaker. I have a camera. Get dressed," Elise said. "I will burn the footage from this trail cam to a drive. Take everything." As I was putting on my coat, There was a knock at the front door. I jumped. My nerves frayed. I checked the camera. It was Jonah. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed. His clothes rumpled. He was not wearing his work uniform. I opened the door. Jonah. I cannot right now. I have to Ms. Brooks, he interrupted. I need to tell you something. He stepped inside without asking. He looked at Elise, then at the shattered mug on the floor. I lied to you, he said. What I mean, I did not lie about the crying. That was real. But I lied about not knowing who Crestline is. I stared at him. You know them, he swallowed hard, wringing his hands. 2 years ago. When I was starting out, I did some subcontracting work. Just day labor. My uncle knew a guy who knew a guy. It was for Crestline Property Solutions. What kind of work, Elise asked. Stepping forward, cleanup, Jonah said. They called it remediation. But it was not normal. We would go into these houses that had just been bought, and we would clear out the basements. But we were not hauling trash. We were hauling sealed plastic bins, heavy ones. Did you look inside, I asked. Once, Jonah said. He looked down at his boots. We were told strictly not to. Do not break the seal. Do not ask questions. But one of the bins was cracked. I saw files, hundreds of them, and hard drives. And I saw a stack of ID cards, passports. Yeah, like dozens of them, different faces. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I quit after 2 jobs. Ms. Brooks, it felt wrong. It felt like we were burying people. Not bodies, but their lives. And when I found that badge clip in your window well, I knew. They are using your house as a transfer station. Why didn't you tell me, I asked. Because I was scared, he whispered. These guys, they have pull. They know where I live. But when you told me about the crying, I cannot let them do that to you. I put a hand on his arm. You are brave for telling me now. Jonah, will you talk to the police? He hesitated, then nodded. If you go. I will go. We went to the Maple Hollow Police Department in a convoy. Me, Elise, and Jonah. The station was a small brick building that smelled of floor wax and indifference. Officer Miller was not there. Instead, we were shown to the desk of a Sergeant Halloway. He was a man with a thick neck and eyes that looked like they had seen too much paperwork and not enough justice. I laid it all out. I put the Bluetooth speaker on his desk. I put the badge clip next to it. I put the trail camera down. I showed him the screenshot of the text message threatening Lila. I showed him the video of the hooded man. And then Jonah told his story. He spoke quietly, stumbling over his words, but he got it out. The sealed bins, the passports, the cash payments. Sergeant Halloway listened. He took notes on a yellow pad. He did not interrupt. When we were finished, silence hung in the small office. The fluorescent lights hummed. Finally. Halloway sighed. He capped his pen. Ms. Brooks, he said. This is a lot of information. It is a crime ring. I said, they are committing insurance fraud. They are squatting in homes. They are threatening children. Halloway leaned back. Look, I can see you are upset. And this text, that is nasty stuff. We can certainly file a report for harassment regarding the text. Harassment. I slammed my hand on the desk. This is extortion. Halloway held up a hand. Who sent the text? Ms. Brooks. Do you have a name? No. It is blocked. So we have an anonymous text. And we have a Bluetooth speaker you found in your own house. And a camera you found in a tree. And the badge clip, Jonah said, a piece of broken plastic. Halloway said, Son, there are a lot of landscapers in this town. Plastic breaks. He looked at me. Ms. Brooks, here is the reality. You are talking about Crestline Property Solutions. They are a major donor to the Police Athletic League. They own half the rental properties in this county. They are a legitimate business. Legitimate businesses do not hide speakers in basements to simulate ghosts, I shouted. We do not know they put it there, Halloway said calmly. Anyone could have put it there. Maybe a prankster. Maybe an ex-husband. He was doing it. He was building the wall. It wasn't that he was corrupt, I didn't see a bribe in his pocket. It was inertia. It was the refusal to believe that the pillar of the community, the company that sponsored the Little League uniforms, could be a monster. It was easier to believe that the single mother was hysterical. He looked at Jonah. And you? You are admitting to hauling sealed bins 2 years ago. Did you report it then, sir? So you are an accomplice, technically, or a disgruntled former contractor making up stories. Jonah shrank back. I stood up. I gathered my evidence. I put the speaker back in my bag. You are not going to help us, I said. I am saying you need proof. Ms. Brooks, Holloway said. Hard proof. Not stories about crying ghosts and feelings. If you catch someone in your house, you call 911. Until then, file a harassment report and go home. And stop speculating about organizations. It could get you sued for libel. I walked out of the station. The sun was high and bright, mocking the darkness I felt. They are protecting them, Jonah said, kicking a pebble in the parking lot. No, Elise said. They are just lazy and scared of money. I looked at my watch. It was 2 p.m. Lila would be home tomorrow. The move tonight deadline was fast approaching. I need eyes that aren't blind, I said. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled back years in my contacts, past the divorce lawyers, past the school moms, to a name I hadn't called in a decade. Kira Vance. We had been roommates freshman year of college. She was intense, chain-smoking, and obsessed with truth. Now, she was an investigative reporter for the Harbor State Ledger, the biggest paper in the state. I dialed. Brooks. Her voice was raspy, surprised. I haven't heard from you since the wedding. I need you. Kira, I said, I have a story. Insurance fraud, real estate shell companies, phantom tenants, and a threat against a child. She went silent. I could hear her typing. Do you have documents, she asked. I have better. I said, I have a trap, and tonight, I'm going to give you a front row seat. I told her everything. By the end of the call, she was breathing hard. If you can get them on video opening a hidden compartment, Kira said. If you can get audio of them admitting the fraud, I can run it Sunday. I can blow the roof off. I will get it. I promised. We went back to the house. The wait began. Elise set up the command center in the guest bedroom upstairs. We moved the monitors there. We darkened the rest of the house. Audrey, Elise said at 9 o'clock, you need to be safe. I am not leaving. I said, then you hide. There was a small linen closet in the hallway, directly opposite the top of the basement stairs. It had a louvered door. If I stood inside, I could see through the slats. I will be in there, I said. At 10 o'clock. Jonah went home, promising to stay by his phone. At 11, the house was silent. At midnight, the wind died down. I stood in the closet. I had my phone in my hand, the camera lens pressed between the slats of the door. My legs were cramping. The smell of old towels was suffocating. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Maybe they weren't coming. Maybe the police visit had spooked them. Maybe they knew. Then, at 2:15, the sound came. It was not the front door. It was a soft click from the basement. They were coming in through the walkout again. I held my breath. I tapped the record button on my phone. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Not the stealthy creep of the woman. These were the boots I had seen on the screen earlier. 2 men came up into the hallway. They were wearing headlamps. The beams cut through the darkness, sweeping across the walls. One of them shone his light right at the closet door. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would rattle the door. The light lingered for a second, then moved away. Clear. A deep voice grunted. They did not go to the kitchen. They stopped at the top of the stairs. Get the panel, the voice said. They went back down a few steps. I could not see them, but I could hear them. I heard the screech of the metal shelf being dragged. I heard the sound of a drill. Whir, whir. They were removing the screw. Got it. A second voice said. I leaned forward, pressing my eye to the slat. They came back up to the landing, carrying a gray plastic bin. They set it down on the hallway floor. One of the men, the bigger one, with a shaved head, reached into the bin. He pulled out a thin black binder and a silver flash drive. "Is this all of it?" he asked. "That is the ledger for the Q3 write-offs," the second man said. "And the drive has the claim adjuster payoffs. Good. Boss wants this gone before the inspection." The first man shoved the binder into a duffel bag he was carrying. Then he paused. He looked around the hallway. "What about the homeowner?" he asked. "She went to the cops today. Let her talk." The second man sneered. He was holding the flash drive up to his headlamp, checking it. "Nobody listens to hysterical women." He laughed. A low, ugly sound. "Besides," he said, clearly and distinctly, his voice carrying through the thin wood of the closet door, "we left enough paperwork in that wall. If the homeowner reports this, we pin the fraud on her. We say she was the one cooking the books for the remodel." I felt a cold shockwave go through me. They weren't just using my house. They were setting me up as the fall guy. "We pin the fraud on her." I had it. I had the audio. I had the video of them holding the stolen ledger. The man zipped up the bag. "Let's move. We have 2 more houses to hit tonight." They picked up the bin. They turned to go back down the stairs. My finger hovered over the stop button. I had what I needed. Kira would run the story. The police would have to act. But then, the second man stopped. "Wait," he said. He turned his headlamp back toward the shelf where the camera had been hidden, the one I had moved to the guest room with Elise. "The camera is gone," he said. Silence. "She knows," the first man said. His voice changed. It wasn't bored anymore. It was predatory. "Check the bedrooms," he commanded. My blood turned to ice. They were not leaving. They were hunting, and I was in the closet, 3 feet away from them. I pressed my hand over my mouth, my knuckles digging into my lips until I tasted the metallic tang of blood. The closet was a coffin of vertical slats and the smell of lavender detergent. Through the thin wood of the door, I could hear the heavy, deliberate footsteps of the men in the hallway. They were predators, confident and slow, moving through my sanctuary as if they held the deed. "Check the bedrooms," the first man had said. I heard the door to the guest room open. That was where Elise was monitoring the feeds. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a desperate bird trying to break the cage. If they found Elise, they would find the monitors. They would know we had seen everything. And then, the violence that had been implicit in their threats would become immediate. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the shout, the scuffle, the gunshot, but there was only silence. Then, the sound of the guest room door closing, clear. The second man grunted. My breath hitched. Elise was gone. She had heard them coming. She had vanished. "Check the master," the first man commanded. They walked past my closet. I saw the beam of their headlamp slice through the slats, a momentary blinding flash that illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. I held my breath, every muscle in my body locked rigid. If I exhaled, if my knee popped, if the floorboard creaked, it was over. They went into my bedroom. I heard the closet doors sliding open on their tracks. I heard them sweeping the clothes aside. Nothing. The second man said. His voice was muffled now. "She is not here," the first man said. He sounded irritated, not suspicious. "She probably ran to her mother's house after the cops blew her off." "Grab the bag," the second man said. "We are behind schedule. If we miss the drop at the depot, the boss will have our heads." They walked back into the hallway. I saw their shadows pass the slats again, hulking and distorted. They picked up the gray bin. I heard the heavy zip of the duffel bag. "Let's go," the first man said. They descended the stairs. I heard their boots hitting the wood. Then the transition to the concrete of the basement. I heard the walkout door open and close. I did not move. I counted to 60. Then I counted to 60 again. My phone was still in my hand. The screen dark. I had the recording. I had their faces. I had the confession. If the homeowner reports this, we pin the fraud on her. A soft tap on the closet door made me jump so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. Audrey. It was Elise. Her voice was a whisper, coming from the ceiling. I pushed the door open. Elise was dropping down from the attic access hatch in the hallway ceiling. She landed silently, cat-like, dusting off her black cargo pants. They are gone, she said. I watched them drive away from the roof vent. I slumped against the doorframe, my legs turning to water. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. We have it, I whispered, holding up the phone. We have everything. Send it. Elise commanded. Right now. Do not wait until morning. Do not wait until your hands stop shaking. Send it to your reporter. I unlocked my phone. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages. I opened the messaging app. I attached the video file. I typed a single line to Kira Vance, watch this. Then call me. The progress bar crawled across the screen. Sending, delivered. Now the cloud. Elise said. I opened my secure drive. I uploaded the video. I created a folder named Insurance. I added the audio file of the crying. I added the photos of the badge clip and the speaker. Then I did something I had read about in spy novels, but never thought I would need. I created a timed share link. I set it to email the folder to 5 people: my brother in Ohio, my lawyer, Kira, Elise, and the general tip box for the FBI. If I did not log in and cancel it every 24 hours, a dead man's switch. It is done. I said. The digital safety net was cast. If they touched me, if they touched Lila, the truth would detonate. Elise nodded. She sat on the floor, opening her hard case. I am not calling Holloway, she said. That man is either bought or he is a coward. I am going over his head. She dialed a number. It was 3 a.m. She put it on speaker. State Insurance Fraud Bureau. An automated voice said. Elise punched in a code. It bypassed the menu. A human operator answered. Sounding alert. This was not a public tip line. This was a priority channel. This is Elise Morrow, ID number 492 Alpha. I have a Class A felony in progress in Maple Hollow. Organized ring. Multi-million-dollar exposure. She spoke for 10 minutes. She gave them the pairing name of the speaker. She gave them the license plate number of the van she had pulled from the trail camera. She gave them the names of the shell companies I had found. When she hung up, she looked at me. The ball is rolling, she said. The state investigators are slow, but they are like a steamroller. Once they start, they do not stop for local politics. But what about Lila? I asked. The fear for my daughter was a cold stone in my stomach. She comes home in 8 hours. We go get her, Elise said. And we make sure they see us. The sun came up over Maple Hollow like a mockery of a fresh start. The sky was a brilliant, innocent blue. The birds were singing. It was a perfect autumn day for a soccer game or a pumpkin patch visit. I felt like I was walking through a minefield. I drove to the school staging area an hour early. I refused to wait at the house. Elise stayed behind to secure the perimeter and retrieve her hidden cameras before they were discovered. The staging area was the high school parking lot. Parents were gathering, holding coffees, chatting about the weather. I stood by my car, my sunglasses on, scanning the perimeter. I was looking for the van. I was looking for the hoodie. When the bus pulled in, a cheer went up from the parents. The yellow beast hissed to a halt. The doors opened. Teenagers spilled out, looking exhausted and happy, dragging duffel bags. I saw Lila. She was laughing with a friend, her hair messy, wearing a sweatshirt I didn't recognize. She looked so normal. She had no idea that while she was roasting marshmallows, her mother was hiding in a closet from men who wanted to erase our lives. Lila, I called out. She saw me and waved. She started to walk toward me. Then I saw him. Standing near the open luggage bay of the bus was a man in a bright yellow vest with the Bright Haven Youth Initiative logo on the back. He was not unloading bags. He was standing still, watching the reunion. He was looking right at me. He raised his hand to his ear. He was wearing a wired earpiece. He murmured something into his lapel microphone. My blood ran cold. They were watching the pickup. They wanted to see if I was panicked. They wanted to see if I had broken. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt like stretching rubber. I waved enthusiastically at Lila. I walked toward her with a bounce in my step I did not feel. Hey, sweetie, I said, hugging her fiercely. I pulled her close, burying my face in her hair to hide my expression from the watcher. Mom, you are crushing me. Lila laughed. squirming away. "Ready to go?" I asked loudly. "I have a surprise dinner planned." I grabbed her bag. I did not look at the Brighthaven man. I threw the bag in the trunk. "Get in the car," I said, keeping my voice light. As I drove out of the lot, I watched the rearview mirror. The man in the yellow vest was still standing there, watching my car disappear. He pulled out a phone and started typing. We drove home. Lila chattered about the ropes course and the cabin drama. I nodded and said, "Wow," at the right intervals, but my mind was screaming. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. It was subtle. If I hadn't been living in a state of hyper-awareness for 3 days, I might not have noticed. The front porch mat was straightened. The dead leaves I had tracked in yesterday were gone. I unlocked the door. Lila dropped her bag in the foyer. "I am going to shower," she announced. "I smell like a campfire." She ran upstairs. I stood in the hallway. I sniffed the air. Lemon, not bleach this time. Lemon verbena. A fresh, expensive cleaning scent. I walked to the kitchen. The camera I had hidden in the pothos plant was there, but the little green power light was off. I checked the outlet behind the fridge. The plug had been pulled. They had been here while I was at the school. I walked to the basement door. It was unlocked. I went down the stairs. The air was crisp. The floor was spotless. The puddle near the drain was gone, wiped dry. I went to the hidden panel under the stairs. I knelt down. The shiny silver screw was gone. In its place was a white screw, painted over to match the wood perfectly. I pushed on the shelf. It wouldn't budge. They had bolted it to the wall. Everything was reset. If I brought the police here now, there would be nothing. No speaker, no open panel, no hidden ledger, just a clean, dry basement and a crazy woman. It was a message. We can scrub the world. We can make you look insane. My phone rang. It was Kira Vance. I answered, putting it to my ear as I stared at the sealed wall. I watched the video. Kira said, her voice was shaking with the thrill of the hunt. "Audrey, this is dynamite." "What did you find in the ledger?" I asked. "It is a closed loop," Kira said. I ran the names. Crestline buys the property. A shell company called Titanium Repair bills the insurance for massive structural work that never happens. They pay the claim adjuster a kickback. I found 3 adjusters on that flash drive list who act as independent verifiers. Then, they sell the house to a rental holding company they also own. "And Brighthaven?" I asked. "They are the scouts," Kira said. "They use their outreach programs to find vulnerable homeowners, single moms, elderly people, people in crisis. They identify the targets. Then the water damage happens. Then Crestline makes the lowball cash offer to save them. It is predatory." I said, "It is a machine," Kira corrected. "And that binder you filmed, that is the master key. It links the non-profit to the for-profit. It proves the intent to defraud. When can you run it Sunday?" Kira said, "I need 48 hours to verify the bank routing numbers so legal doesn't kill the story. But Audrey, you need to be careful. If they know you have this, they know." I said, "They reset my house today. They are erasing their tracks." I hung up. I felt a grim satisfaction. They could paint over screws, but they couldn't paint over the digital file sitting on a server in 3 different countries. A second call came through immediately. "Unknown number." I hesitated, then answered, "Ms. Brooks." A man's voice, deep, bureaucratic. "Yes, this is Investigator Haynes with the State Bureau. We received a priority tip from Elise Morrow." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Are you coming?" "We are opening a file," Haynes said. "I have reviewed the preliminary data. It is compelling. I would like to schedule an interview with you. Today I asked, can you send a car?" Haynes paused. "Ms. Brooks, these investigations take time. We have to subpoena the bank records before we can move on the physical assets. We are building a case. I can come out on Monday morning." Monday I nearly screamed. "They are in my house now. They threatened my daughter." "I understand you are frightened," Haynes said, his voice dropping into that maddeningly calm register of law enforcement. "But we cannot just raid a corporation based on a video and a tip. We need warrants. Can you offer protection?" I asked. Can you put a patrol car outside? I cannot authorize resources for a civil dispute until charges are filed. Haynes said, and right now, this is technically an insurance matter. I hung up on him. Technicalities, paperwork, warrants. While these men walked through my walls, I went upstairs. Lila was singing in the shower. I sat on her bed, watching the door, holding the hammer I had retrieved from the kitchen drawer. At 5 o'clock, the mail arrived. I walked out to the box. There was a thick envelope with a return address from Vanderbilt Associates, attorneys at law. I ripped it open right there in the driveway. It was a cease and desist order. R.E. defamatory statements and tampering with corporate assets. Dear Ms. Brooks, it has come to our attention that you have been making unfounded and malicious allegations regarding our client, Crestline Property Solutions. Furthermore, we have evidence that you have illegally detained and tampered with proprietary audio-visual equipment belonging to our client. They were suing me. They were twisting it. The speaker in my basement wasn't harassment. It was proprietary equipment. My complaints were defamation. It was a bullying tactic. They wanted to bury me in legal fees until I begged for a settlement. They wanted me to be too scared to talk to Kira. I crumpled the letter in my fist. I am not stopping. I whispered to the empty street. A truck rattled up the road. It was Jonah's beat-up Ford. He pulled into the driveway fast, tires crunching on the asphalt. He didn't wave. He jumped out of the cab. Looking over his shoulder, he ran up to me. He looked sick. His face was pale, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Jonah, I said. They came to my house, he gasped. Who, 2 guys? In suits. They were waiting on my porch when I got home. What did they say? They told me I was confused. Jonah said, they told me that if I talked to the police again, they would report me for theft of materials from those job sites 2 years ago. They said they have video of me taking tools. It is a lie. Ms. Brooks, I never took anything, but they said they would ruin me. They said I would never work in this town again. He was shaking. He was a kid, barely 22, and he was being crushed by a machine he didn't understand. It is okay. Jonah, I said, you do not have to talk to them. We have the proof. He shook his head frantically. That is not all. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie. He pulled out a phone. It wasn't his phone. It was an old flip phone, scratched and dusty. I found this, he said. It was in the bed of my truck. They must have tossed it there when they were leaning on me, or maybe dropped it. I don't know, but I turned it on. He flipped the phone open. The screen glowed a dull green. Look at the voice memos, he said. I took the phone. I navigated to the media folder. There was one file. It was labeled Basement Cry Loop. Master. I pressed play. It wasn't the recording of the crying I had heard. It was a studio recording. Okay, take one, a woman's voice said. It was the woman I had seen on the camera. The technician. Make it sound wetter, more desperate. Then, the crying started. The sobbing, the hitching breath. Cut. The woman's voice said, too old. Pitch it up. Make it sound like a 7-year-old. The crying started again, higher, thinner, terrifyingly real. That is it. The woman said, that is the money maker. Loop that. Add the echo filter for the ducks. I stared at the phone. This wasn't just evidence of a speaker. This was the making of the weapon. This was the proof that the terror was manufactured, directed, and refined in a studio. They recorded it like a commercial, I whispered. Jonah looked at me. His eyes filled with tears. They are monsters. Ms. Brooks, he said. I closed the phone. I held it tight in my hand. They were monsters. But they were monsters who had just dropped the smoking gun in the bed of a pickup truck. I looked at the house. Lila was inside, safe for now. Elise was working the state lines. Kira was writing the exposé. And I had the phone. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house looked normal, but beneath the stairs, the silence was waiting. I walked back toward the front door, Jonah trailing behind me. I am going to burn them down, I said, not with fire, with this. I walked inside, and for the first time in 4 days, I locked the door not out of fear, but out of preparation. The siege was over. The war had just begun. Thank you for listening to this part of the story. I hope the tension is keeping you on the edge of your seat as much as it is for me writing it. Please leave a comment letting me know where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you are enjoying the series, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you do not miss the finale. What do you think Audrey should do with the phone? Should she give it to the police or save it for the reporter? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one,